Welcome to the video, everyone. Thanks for joining me. So, an exciting interview for you today with one of my members of the Elite Academy 3.0, Matthew, who's also a 10K Elites member. He's going to walk you through his first failed product launch right the way through to his most recent, which brought him straight into the 10K club within his first month of selling on Amazon in December 2020. So super exciting, very insightful, full of information for you all to help you avoid making some of the mistakes that he made, that he outlines in the interview. So I hope you enjoy the video, guys. Any questions for us? Drop it in the comment section below. I love recording these style of videos, so I hope you enjoy it. Right, guys, so we are here with Matt. I'm going to let him introduce himself and tell me where he's from and when he joined the academy, things like that.
Hi, I'm Matt. I joined the academy a while ago now, easily 3 years ago. I'm from Stafford. I think when I joined the academy, I was already selling on Amazon, so I was selling a mixture of arbitrage, but I think I was just about stepping away from that and then moving into wholesale. And at the point of that, I was then considering moving into a private label, and then that was where it sort of started for the most part. Yeah, I started it back in 2008 from the beginning.
3 years.
Over the last few years.
3 years ago. The time has flown.
It couldn't even be longer than that, really.
Yeah.
I was dabbling a bit. I remember the first product I bought on arbitrage was Soap and Glory was the brand. It was a little Christmas set thing or whatever. But I remember when I realised how good it was, the arbitrage, even just the buying and selling thing, I bought it for £10 and then I was selling it for 30 quid. And I remember I bought 10 units to begin with, spent my £100 and then put it on Amazon, and it took a few days, and then it sold one. And then over the course of probably a couple of weeks, it sold, 4 or 5. It took a few weeks to sell them all. And then that's when I was like, okay, yeah, let's give this a good crack. But I think the main reason why that was started, though, it wasn't really for my stuff. We'll talk about my stuff in a minute, I guess. But it was more, I was originally setting up the Amazon stuff for the missus. Pretty much that was the plan.
Yeah.
She was in the middle of maternity leave, or soon to go on. I forget. There's been so many kids. And the idea was that she would go back, and this would be the residual thing where maybe she doesn't go back full time or at all.
Okay.
That was the idea at the beginning. And to be blunt, that basically resulted in she didn't really fancy it, and I took it on.
You took it on yourself.
Yeah, which I think was fine, and got more and more involved. And we do the cross collaboration, selecting things now, designs and packaging and things like that. But for the most part, it's become my little baby that I'm just working on in the background, on days off, weekends, evenings, whenever it can be fit in, really. But yeah, the long-term plans changed from what the original long-term plan was. But I think from there, I can see a bit of a macro picture now, long-term stuff.
Yeah.
Versus at the beginning, it was very much, let's give this a crack for a year and see what happens. Whereas now it's more like easily a 5-year plan, probably a bit beyond, depending on how it's structured. But then beyond that, yeah, probably be copy paste on the plan that we've got for it over those 5-year increments.
Yeah, I've got a lot of husband and wife teams, partners who sort of go into this venture together and again like cross collaborate with each other and help each other out. But what were you doing at the time when what we're talking about now, back in 2018, what were you doing professionally? Were you working, and are you still doing that now? What's your sort of setup at the moment?
Yeah, well, I remember the very first time we spoke. I think we exchanged a few messages. The very first time we spoke, I was working away. I think it was in Bristol. I used to work for a corporate, so I was an IT architect, technical architect for a corporate company. And I was in the middle of trying to get my bump up. I was like associate director, moving to the director level, trying to had lofty ideas for that. And I remember the call because we was down in Bristol, and then I was in my hotel room, and that's what I was doing at the time. Knee deep in the corporate world and fully intending to stay there. Like, why not, right? That was the full plan. And then I think over the course of probably not many months after that, then that vision, goal, whatever, changed. Not to say that the Amazon piece forced that change. It was just another piece to add on to it, as well as the other little ventures and stuff I was working on. But yeah, that was what I was doing. I was working a full-time job in the IT world, looking at that corporate ladder, making the next move or trying to make the next move. And then that was the current long-term plan. As for now, I'm still working in the IT world on a different basis. I sort of work part-time now. I work 4 days a week, so I've got time to do these other bits and pieces of ventures I'm working on. And that'll probably remain the same. I think, to be honest, there were some expectations that I would step away from the day job stuff. And I've got a friend, now a business partner I work with our property ventures. We started to do quite well on one of these little ventures we was working on. And in my head, automatically, I was like, right, we'll get to the point, and then you can retire, right? Well, you can finish, and then we'll grow. And then he said, well, why would I? We're doing all this now, making what we're making now, and we're still doing it around our jobs quite easily. In fact, a little bit late nights here and there, depending on what's going on. And then that stuck with me. We're still business partners now, so it didn't break us. That stuck with me because now I'm looking at things that if I can do it in parallel to whatever else I'm doing, then I'll carry on doing it until it becomes a big strain. So that's the plan, really. I'm not going to step away from the day job stuff. I'll be doing it in different variations. Maybe I'll reduce down to a smaller amount of days over time.
Yeah.
But I'll be doing it parallel.
Yeah.
I mean, why not?
And you can see how things go. Ultimately, I mean, preempting, sort of having a fixed expectation of, this is exactly what I want to do in 2 years. There's so many variables in that, and that will depend on each other whether or not you're able to do it. And like you're saying, it's better to go with the flow. If you're able to juggle the workload and you enjoy it, like the odd late night here and there. I mean, there's no sort of, some people will go into FBA and have that sort of, and it's good to have goals, what you want to achieve, but sort of say to themselves in their head, 2 years, I want to quit my job, full-time Amazon FBA, and that's what's going to happen. And some people think it's going to happen overnight, first product, first month, boom, when in reality, well, you will know from your first product, which we'll speak about a little bit later in the video, it's not always that simple, and you've got to be realistic with it. And sometimes just go with the flow. See what you're enjoying. A lot of people enjoy their work. Some people don't, but a lot of people do. And I mean, that builds in, I suppose, to the next question or topic that I wanted to mention, which is expectations with FBA, right? Because a lot of people start this. Everyone's got expectations. They start it for a reason. And they expect it to be a certain way and them to work a certain amount of time and the results to be a certain way. How were you at the start? How did you feel about it? What did you expect from FBA?
I think because I wasn't initially planning on it being directly for me, I probably had similar expectations to what a lot of people would have anyway, on the premise that let's get this up and working, and then that can be a stream of income. And that was the target for a while. Then as and where things started to build up, even when I was doing quite well in between arbitrage and wholesale, still sort of looked at it for, well, is that really enough income? Is that right? Even if it's part-time income for my partner or whatever else. But I think from a perception point of view, that idea that was going to be the job replacement is now drastically changed. And instead, going back to the piece about running it in parallel, I'm not really going to plan on taking anything residual out. Not really. No intention at all, if I'm honest. Instead, it will be running that parallel thing and getting the whole thing, whether it's the brand that's sold or the entity itself, and then selling it and then taking the payday and then reinvesting at that point. So that's where it's massively changed perception-wise, is the idea of going from the residual income stream to actually the payday at the end of that period, which I think is realistically 5 years maybe we're at, I reckon, for this first new launch, if you will. But then I'll look to repeat that. So it will never really become a residual thing until it becomes so much work where I have to start taking something from it because I can't do the other thing.
Yeah, I see.
But that's where it's changed massively.
Interesting. Okay, yeah. So I mean, I don't think, to be honest, that we've had anyone we've actually interviewed specifically who's mentioned that they essentially, what you're saying, you've got an exit strategy. So you want to build it up to a point where it's a recognized brand and then sell it. And that's when you're actually going to take something from it rather than having a monthly income, for example, taking out of the business account. Is that what you're saying essentially? Or
yeah, that's it. Yeah, I couldn't dream of taking anything out right now.
No. And we speak about that a lot. I've got a YouTube video where we look at an example. I can't remember the exact figures, but it was just looking at if you took out X amount of your profits every month, say 30%, how much that actually hinders your growth over a 3-year period. It was absolutely huge over a 3-year period because obviously that 30% is 30% more products, which would generate 30% more income potentially, and as that grows, it can have a big effect. So that mindset, I'm on the same page with you there, and I'd encourage everyone to do that. When you're launching a brand, ideally you don't want to be taking a lot of money out of it to begin with. You want to grow it into a point where either, like you said, you're doing so much work that you need to take an income from it, or you can afford to, or you're just looking at a long-term strategy. So first product, we're going to talk about this, right? This is an interesting one. So you kick it off with your first product. Tell everyone what happened.
So I think I followed, let's call it the right steps.
Yeah.
But I didn't follow them enough detail, enough depth. And I think the two key things that came out of it was sort of impatience and probably wasn't persistent enough to begin with. So the first product, I went in there with like blinkers on, I think it's fair to say. I looked and I did the right kind of steps, but for example, if I'm looking at the profit margin and it was like 25% in the best case, then that's what I had in my mind going forward. 25%, let's move on, let's go for it. And even things where I looked to distinguish the product, it wasn't really quite enough to like distinguish it fully across that market space. And also, I think it was generally just saturated market space. So there's loads and loads of mistakes that are made, and there'll be more and more that come out for this conversation. But it was the wrong kind of analysis was done. It wasn't done at quite the right depth, I would say, or the right breadth. How we were going to differentiate, it just wasn't good enough. One of the biggest things, and this is where it's totally 180'd into the new set of products, is I never left enough fat on the bone. So I never left enough potential profit in the product to do the extra bits and pieces, to do the custom packaging, to do the X, Y, Z. So when we wanted to introduce those things, it really hit the profit margin, like enough that it makes it almost a neutral. It was at some points early on, although it did ultimately become down. And that's probably one of the biggest mistakes. I didn't factor in everything and give myself realistic numbers. I was very lofty with them.
Wiggle room is key, isn't it? And we were speaking about this before the call. You know, if you're priced at your max price, and that is what when you've calculated what you want your margin to be, you're making the decision to purchase and launch on being able to achieve that max price straight away. You haven't left yourself that wiggle room that you need, because in an ideal world, and we looked at the example where what you did with the current product was your margins were based off the bottom end figures, and then what that meant was that you had a little bit of flexibility when you were transitioning up, which you've done successfully now with the price. You've built your way up over the last sort of 6 to 8 weeks, and a little bit of a launch strategy has been put in place there. So, I mean, with the first product, what were you using to find it? Were you Helium 10 Jungle Scout? What was your?
I don't think it was Helium 10 then. I think it was actually Jungle Scout to begin with.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it was, in fact. But then at some point I did begin to use Helium 10 because we had another couple of products that we launched in that gap as well, which ultimately was led down the same path, the rush and the bad analysis. But at that time, I think I did cross over and start to use Helium 10, but more so for the post activities. So getting the listing created, the additional keyword research to pop into a list and things like that. But for the first one, it was solely Jungle Scout. Yeah, it was solely Jungle Scout for the analysis side of things.
Back in the day, I mean, 2019, 2018, I think Helium 10 was just sort of coming to the surface in that space, wasn't it? It's much bigger now than it was certainly 2 years ago. It's, I would say, probably dominating over Jungle Scout at the moment.
I mean, I'm only using Helium 10 now.
Yeah, I prefer it.
It's so wide. The breadth of it now is like there's certain tasks. So I know the PPC, right? I know we're going to talk about the PPC anyway, but so when we was doing the PPC for the first set of products, I would blindly just pump in the cash in, not drastic amounts, but enough that I didn't really have a full concept of where the margins lay in the end. You know, I was making sure I was putting enough money in for the advertising, so I was still, not running out of the budgets. And I was seeing sales. Never really had a full concept until I sat down and tried to work it out, which was super difficult. But then now I've upgraded, or so at the time I upgraded to the Helium 10, whatever the right level is, so I could also have ads. Game changer. I instantly saved half the amount on advertising because I could see what was happening.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, Helium 10 is like just very, very functional product for its what you need it for.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned on the channel before, Salix is another good tool to track profits and how PPC is one of many costs that you're going to incur when you're selling. But having that, like you mentioned, being able to review daily, weekly, monthly on, actually how much profit are you making that day, that week, that month when you're factoring in PPC. Otherwise, you're just blind to it. Like you said, you're just pumping in cash. You've got in your head, you're thinking, right, my margin's about 30%. I'm spending £15 a day, or, it still works out about right. But in reality, it can have a real impact and dent on what you're actually doing. And you'll only really realize that when your bank balance isn't going up as it should. And when you come to reinvest, you think, shit, actually, I haven't actually made any profit from this product if you've been a little bit negligent with your PPC spend, which is easy to do. PPC is hard to master PPC, and we'll speak about it a little bit later in the discussion. But so talking about the second product, a lot of people will want to hear now. And again, we talked about the theme of this sort of this chat. People want to learn from other people's mistakes, right? You know, I look for advice when I'm looking at property now. I've never invested in property, so I'm looking for advice from someone who's made mistakes, so I don't make them, basically. And there's a lot of costly mistakes that you can make with Amazon FBA, which is why a lot of people spend a lot of time researching and they get training, etc. But from your first product to your second, right? You obviously mentioned you learned a lot and the mistakes you made with the first. How did the second go, and how did you transition from that first to the second? I'm going to ask a few questions here. I'm going to try and narrow it down. But what kept you motivated to continue with the second? Where did the confidence come from when the first one was it because you recognised that you rushed it, etc.? And how did the second product go? When did it launch? How did it go?
Well, there were two in the middle, really. So really, we're talking between the first and the fourth in reality. But
Yeah.
I don't consider the second and third as like real products. Although one of them's doing okay, but I'm not going to renew that product anyway. But the gap between the first one and where we are now, I think one of the best words I can use is like frustration. So I was looking, thinking, what am I doing wrong? What's going on? And that was like frustration enough for me to reinvest in sort of time, effort, training to work out what's going on. What do I need to do to plug the gap? So I think frustration is the biggest thing that comes to mind. And then I just wanted to almost give it another crack. I can't say for sure if this current product, if it would have failed, if I would have carried on further. I mean, probably maybe one more product, I don't know. But it was certainly what I needed in terms of the boost. So it was almost like I needed another crack at the whip, so to speak, just to give it another stab.
What wanted to give up?
Yeah. I could have been close. I reckon realistically, I might have done one more product after this current one if it wouldn't have worked out, and then it would have been like, okay, let's wind it down now. But the biggest difference was that total polarized view of I'm looking at margins like this over here and acceptable, but instead I need to be looking at bigger margins. I need to be looking at a bigger safety net for what I'm doing. Even some basic things like the demand for the new set of products isn't huge. But then it was almost looking at it, even if the demand isn't huge, it means there's less competition. So what do we need to look at to fill that gap? And probably the biggest difference, and this is where the frustration I think comes in, the difference between the first product and the current product is the price range. Having products at such a low price range in the first instance, unless they're flying off the shelves, to which the first product for me wasn't, it's super difficult to really gain the margin, to gain the profit, to gain the cash back. Versus with the second or the latest set of products, don't need to sell an awful lot of them, but the profit is just exponential in comparison. So what that allows me to do really is, with it being so big in terms of the price margin, I've got loads of wiggle room for stuff. If I want to do the custom packaging, I want to do the inserts or the extra things of the products, I can do that. And it might eat into the margin a little bit, but that can be fully absorbed, along with, having to lower the price drastically because new competition. And that's what I didn't do beforehand, is account for the polar sides of it. Not to say I needed to launch a product as expensive as this one is now. It could have been somewhere in the middle probably.
Yeah.
But it would have given me enough elbow room, versus when I had the first one, you couldn't introduce, quotes, a premium product because there was no elbow room to do so, unless you're getting ridiculously low margin purchase prices to begin with.
Yeah, and you mentioned as well that ultimately, if you are launching a product with a lower price point, that typically is going to have in terms of a monetary figure, less amount of profit per item. You are quite heavily reliant upon the fact that you're going to sell in big volumes. And you mentioned that one of the things you hadn't done was differentiate enough with that product. It blended in quite a bit with what else was there, and unfortunately that resulted in the volume not being there, basically. And like you said, finding that sweet spot. Obviously you're at a higher price point here, but again, somewhere in the middle. Unless, again, of course, if you've really got a product that you feel is highly differentiated and you've added tons of value, and it typically is more competitive when you're at that lower price point, there just tends to be more people, because it's easier to do, right? You typically don't have to invest in as much to launch 100 products that cost $3 each, whereas your product, if you were to purchase 100 of them, it would cost a lot more. So you're sort of you're almost eliminating a lot of your competition, because you're pricing them out by the avenue that you're going down. And that can also, that happens as well with the same with sort of some of the barriers to entry. So, approval with products, if you've got to go you've got experience with this, CE marking, declarations of conformity, go through the testing. People don't do it. So when you do get into those marketplaces, typically they're less competitive, and it's you've done the work that's weeded out the people who aren't going to follow through with it. So okay, that's interesting. So first product, when did you launch? What I'm banging my desk here now. My camera's shaking as I'm getting excited. So when did you launch? And how did your first month go? What are your margins on it? Because profit is ultimately what we care about, not revenue.
So the first one I really almost forget is the year before last. I think it was. Yeah, maybe 19, end of 19 possibly. I know when we launched, it was okay. We had that bit of a jump up with Amazon, so we didn't have to put too much PPC in. But I guess I would say we were still no more than around 25% margin.
Okay. Yeah.
But then over the period, as we moved through Christmas into the early part of the next year, that's went down and down and down. I think for a while we were floating between 10 and 15%. We had a little bit of PPC in there. And then that just got worse and worse and worse, to the point where it was like neutral. So that end-to-end period was less than a year from having reasonable. I even put in a reorder for that first product on the premise that this is okay, it's doing all right, let's carry on.
Yeah.
By the time that stock landed and it was back in, not good. So yeah, probably between 2025 when we launched, and then it ultimately willed it down.
And with your current, so with the product that you just launched, how's that gone, revenue wise, profit wise?
Yeah. So we plan to launch between 20 and 25% sales margin. That was the intended plan.
Yeah, the bottom line.
on the fact it was sustainable.
Yeah.
By the time it launched, we were quickly over that, 25 to 30. And then over the course of between now, or when it launched, and now, over 50% margin. I think 52-ish.
Wow.
Sort of figures. But it's only gone up so much now is because we've had to put the price up just to slow the sales down.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to be out of stock. We will full out of stock, I think, before the next batch lands. It's on the sea now. But that will come back down when we put the prices back to what they should be. It will probably more so be around 45 or so % margin is what the expectation is.
And was it
like over 120, 130% return on investment, more than. 140.
And what did you launch? You launched start of December 2020, was it?
Yeah.
Start of December. And what was the total first 30 days of revenue? What, 10 or 11,000?
Yeah, I got my little plaque in it. It was over 10k in the end. I was selling my other stuff as well, but the other stuff just sells for shit. Language sells for not so good. So I think the month was nearly 11 altogether, but then it was like 10 grand pretty much for that first.
Yeah, about 10k. And again, obviously, like you said, starting off and it quickly rose up to that 50. Let's say averaged out up at about 40. Again, that just pulling that figure as an average between the two. So about 4k profit roughly in the first month. And you see, from what we spoke about before, so I mean, it's not just about the first month. The goal is for this figure to rise as you gain more reviews and dominate that your search terms. But we want this to be sustainable. We want that to be a monthly income, 4k a month, every month, if not more. And how are you planning on doing that with this brand, with this product?
So I think I set the goal a little bit too low, to be honest. So the intention was by October this year, 21, we would have the 3 to 4 products. 3 would be the target, really, and then to be turning over plus 10k, but then with minimum 30% margin.
Yeah.
And that was like the realistic goal we had plans for. And then that then frames it up then to grow into that, year on year into the 5-year plan. I kind of feel we'll probably surpass that. But the 30% margin is probably realistic because there's a couple of products which will be between 20 and 30, depending on how we get about them. But those products are almost needed to complete the set, if that makes sense. It's almost like a necessary evil. There is scope for them to grow, but this is all based on the lower end figures. So the plan was 10k turnover a month with at least 30% margin.
What you doing?
That will probably change because already this month what are we now? Just with the one good product, nearly 6k turnover. We've got another few days to go.
Yeah.
And that's even with the other products dragging down the overall margin for the account, we still have a 30% margin. So with the other 2 products when they land, and one of them should have been launched before Christmas, but we've had massive delays, as you said, with testing, that just car crash, thousands spent in the end on that bad story. But When that one launches, that should sit quite nicely next to the next one. And then with the other one planned, which will be delayed now, production won't start till April time, I think, for the third product. They all should be landed and established by that target, so May, June, in that sort of period, given a 2 to 3 month window to meet the target. But I feel quite confident now, seeing how January's gone with the first product in the new range, that we should quite comfortably reach that target. I don't know when we'll surpass it and what it will be, but October is the cut-off, and then it gets into silly season with Christmas and stuff. I'm sure the figures. I wouldn't be surprised if we're plus 20k a month through November, December.
Yeah, Q4 is
what I'd imagine.
Yeah,
with Christmas season,
especially for
if we
that
get to
type of
10k,
product.
then
yeah. So essentially,
10k in October's target.
So a pool 10k, 10, 11, 12k of revenue is the target, with 3, 4k profit a month coming in relatively passively at that stage, and that's what I wanted to lead on to here. A lot of people, assuming that people who are watching this understand how Amazon works and how the fulfillment system is all integrated into it. But a big reason why a lot of people do this is that the fact that it's relatively passive when you're set up, but it isn't when you're setting up, right? And you have experience of that. How would you balance those two out? I mean, obviously to the point up to when you've launched, and say a couple of weeks after, once you've got all the nitty-gritty PPC stuff done. How much are you doing now for that 10k a month product that you've launched in the start of December? Hours now per week compared to what you were doing in the build-up to launch. Roughly.
Yeah, I can't give you like an exact hours. I have no concept of the time at the moment.
It was that much.
yeah. But so for the initial part, we went through several conversations, calls, lots of prep ready for those first set of products, and hours and hours and hours went into that analysis and getting it to the point of being ready, including the listing and all the normal bumps. That took a long time. If I'm going to try and give a percentage ratio, which is probably more realistic, I'd say it's a good 90-10 now. Whereas that was like the 90% of it, and it's now reduced to 10. And even when we were speaking earlier, I'd probably spend more time on that one product through the day just out of curiosity, how's it doing?
Oh, have I got a sale? Check
the
sales.
I shouldn't need to do that, but I did spend, let's be realistic, 3 or 4 weeks back, I probably spent a couple of hours through the week just rearranging and confirming the next order, arranging the shipping. Probably a couple of hours effort, out and about doing my bits and bobs and other little ventures. Probably 2 hours to get the reorder sorted and established, because I have to get a new shipper. I'm trialing different shippers through this year as well, which is a bit of an experiment. So I was getting a new shipper sorted. That was no more than a couple of hours.
Yeah, which is
versus now for it. So the only reason I'll go on to, and I rarely go onto the Amazon app if I can help it, because it becomes a bit addictive. So what I try and do instead, I use the Helium 10 and I just focus on the profits tab versus the main one, because then it's a real number. I'm not just turning over a couple £100 in the day. It's actually
how much you're making. And you said £100 a day. You were looking at a figure about £100 a day. When you checked in on it last, you've actually made £100 profit that day, rather than just seeing a sales figure and X amount on PPC, and you've not actually got any idea how much you've actually made that day.
Exactly,
there's a stark difference between those two. But again, looking at that example, and again, that's one of the reasons why it excites people so much, because what you're ultimately saying there is, yes, we all understand you've got to put in a lot of front end work to get a product launch, and there's no illusion there. You have to. Some are easier than others. I think possibly with your example, it was a bit more difficult, just with the experiences that you went through and the hiccups and things like that. But ultimately, you've got a business now that's generating 2, 3, 4k per month in profit, and you're only doing 2 or 3 hours work. And that concept for people, especially if you don't particularly like what you do, it's an exciting motivator for people to know that if you do put the work in, that is what the business model can provide if you do things correctly. And that doesn't mean that you won't make mistakes and potentially have a failed product. It happens. I've had failed products.
I think probably an important thing to mention though, so albeit let's say it's a 90-10 weighting for that one product, there's another 2 products I'm working in parallel now. One which is massively delayed through multiple fail tests, but it's now resolved. And then another one which is we've just finished the sort of sample testing and we're happy. So I still spend a good amount of time, on
new
where I can. Yeah. So there's still like work and effort going in, but then that's because I'd be looking to release a product every quarter, perhaps.
Yeah.
So you still need some. It's not just a case of like whacking all these hours, whatever it was in the beginning, which was ridiculous, and then chill. If you want to continue to grow,
Yeah,
then fine. But it might be different for some people because
yeah, it depends.
One or two products. That's it. That they want to go on holiday. Well, not in these current times, but
Yeah.
they want to go on holiday
down the road
every couple of months or whatever else, and that's their holiday money. Versus, I need to be getting to that easily. I reckon we're 12 to 15 products of this 4 or 5 year period before we get to the point of it looking like something viable to sell.
Yeah.
So I've got to keep on doing it.
And again, the scalability of the model is something I speak about all the time in that scenario, and it was the same with myself. Ultimately, although, like you said, some people will stop. They're happy with 1 or 2, and you know that is the way that they're going to operate. Often you catch the bug. You want to launch more products. You want to expand your brand, especially after your first one. You've learned so much. It almost feels like a waste to not use those skills and launch something else after you've put all that work in to do it with the first one. But ultimately, again, the fact, if you looked at the example where you, with this product, like you said, you're spending an hour or 2 a week, you know, doing bits and bobs with it, but ultimately a lot of time is going into new products. Let's say, hypothetically then, you were to launch 15 products, for example, under that umbrella of your brand. If you were doing let's say then an hour per week to be able to manage per product, I don't think it would be that much. That'll be 15 hours a week, and 15 times, you know, if it was 3k, that's a 45k per month, and that's just from scaling. That's going to take a lot of work. That's not just like, boom, I'm going to launch 15 products. You know, with what you're doing now, it's going to take a lot of time and effort to get to that point. But in 2 years, and that's what we were talking about with this interview, weren't we? Sort of, you're very much at the beginning of what you're doing and with this brand and with this product, and we're hopefully going to speak again in a year or 2 years, catch up with you. You know, we speak anyway, and just to see how you've gotten on, because from my experience, one guy I interviewed, right, super exciting, very quickly, Suki, I think that's how I pronounce his name, I always get it wrong, but I interviewed him about 1.5 years ago, right, and he outlined his plans to grow and scale. He's now done over 1 million through his Amazon account. And the guy's like 22, I think. He might even be younger than that, 21. He sent me his Seller Central account, all of his stuff, because he wanted the 100k award. And I was just mind blown. The guy is crushing it. And it's nice to see, again, like we were saying, catch up now, catch up then. And hopefully things will go to plan. Off on a bit of a tangent there. But so with people will be wondering then, so launching, a lot of people struggle with PPC. You mentioned that they're using Helium 10 to be able to track things a little bit better. But what was your strategy with PPC? I know with your category, it wasn't hugely competitive anyway. Did you have an idea what your cost per click would be? Did you have an idea what you were going to spend with your budget? And talk people through that a little bit.
Yeah, we did. Ultimately, just to summarise it now, we didn't really have to go heavy on PPC at all, pretty much for this recent product. But perhaps if I compare it to the previous product, which did well from a PPC point of view, I think the budget for that one was like £5 a day to begin with, not much for that first product. But that general mechanism seemed to work. And even then when we started gripping over Helium 10 and looking at utilising that for the advertising, that's much more manageable, so you can like throttle it down to the different kind of campaigns. But for the current product, it was very light, you know. Like, I don't even know if we spent more than 50 quid.
Wow.
I don't know.
Okay.
Not an awful lot. But just generally, there are some advertising and sponsored ads coming into that category now. Not an awful lot, but you know, we're ranking on really decently for a lot of our target keywords for that product. So it's like, I could do the sponsored ad just to make sure I'm on top.
But you already are.
You know, being second, third, or fourth on the page is still fine.
Yeah.
It's almost been less applicable, which I've got it in my back pocket for when I need it, and we still need to get rid of the other stuff. But for the current one, it's unexpected, I think is fair to say.
Yeah, and a lot. I think with your example, I think that in large part is down to the fact that you had a good listing. You get a bit of a bump from Amazon anyway. Some listings do, some listings don't. No one really understands why that is, why they're favourable over certain products and categories over others. But you got a little bit of a bump. Your listing was good. Your main image was really good. The main one. It was really good. No, but
You
it
know
was.
what though? I haven't. I said to you, I'm going to change it. I haven't
I mean,
changed
that's,
it.
that's a great image. That's a great. I like that image. It's good for me to practice my skills. I might chuck my profile up on Fiverr as a freelancer as a little income stream. But no, you did everything. You did everything right. The listing was really good. You have to be getting clicks and sales to be able to maintain that rank. If you won't, you just drop off. So
Yeah.
it's almost they give you a chance to shine. You did. It did well, and now you're positioning that ranking over time. So yeah, that's good. Good to hear. Although, like you said, and I think it's a good point to raise, when you do decide to launch a product, PPC, you need to understand it and you need to expect to have to use it typically,
Yeah,
rather
absolutely.
than expecting that you don't, even though there's and there seems to be more and more examples of people that just aren't really using it much and ranking really well, which is strange. But I still think it's good to use it, good to understand it. And again, it's a tool ultimately. If you can have a profitable PPC campaign, it's not only going to give you extra sales and extra profit, but it's also going to help all your organic ranks for those search terms, and it's going to feed in to your account-wide profit. So
No, absolutely. Well, we did plan. So we sort of set aside budget for PPC.
Yeah.
And it were going to be 10%. So the sort of the mashup spreadsheet I've got for the profit calculator now accounted for 10% for a voucher and then 10% for PPC per sale. So we accounted for it.
Yeah.
But it just very quickly became evident it wasn't.
You didn't need it.
Needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And in your scenario, I absolutely agree with the way that you did it. And it's just an added bonus, isn't it? The fact that, and again, in the future, if you do, and again, that's a good point. In the future, if you do need to utilize it, you've got that wiggle room that you mentioned. You've got that 10% that you may have to spend. So that 10, X amount per sale or whatever it is that your price is at the time. And another point, something I want to ask you about, pick your brain on, right? And see what you think. So we've talked a bit about your presence off of Amazon. So not just purely a product that you're flying out and you don't particularly care about the branding and the product. You do. You care about those things, and you've tried to extract that and use other platforms, social media platforms, to start to build up a little bit of a presence, should we say? What's your reasoning behind that, and how have you done it? Would you recommend people to do that, and what's the gain from it?
No, absolutely. So we've got like a bit of a longer term plan with that. We're almost just throttling on the stuff that we're putting out at the moment until we've got the collection of items, so it'll become more relevant over the next few months. But more so the reasoning is because a lot of the competitors within our set of categories, there's a few different categories it spans across, they're not like super present. Certainly in the UK, which is interesting. A lot of it is more European stuff, depending on what the individual product category is, and US. So I think there's definitely a little niche we can carve in the social media space. I say niche, it won't necessarily be a niche, but as soon as we put some additional effort and money into that social media space, paid adverts and the like, it's going to be very obvious that we're there.
Yeah.
For that category. So we'll do that once we've got a few more products, we'll put more effort into it, but then we'll channel that back to Amazon. I don't really intend on taking anything out of Amazon, as in I'm happy just to deal with that as the sole place where we're going to be listing stuff. But we'll use the additional content put out on social media to channel people back to just bump up the cost. I'll tell you an example, actually. This really happened. When we were getting close to getting to the 10K through December, I was almost thinking, like, just get some friends to buy it. Like, I don't care, man. Just like, I'll pay for it. Just get over the 10K. Yeah. And then what we did, which I thought it just worked a treat. We put a small video of the product. I think it was we had two videos. We had a video of the product itself in use, like something was going to use for advertising. We didn't quite use it in the end. And then we also had like a review type thing done. We put one of them, I forget which one it was. We put it out on that same day. This was about, let's say, evening, 7 o'clock, something like that. Most of our sales come in the evening, not massive volume, but obviously where we are. Anyway, we put that video out, and then we got 3 sales that evening. 3 sales, wow. Which was at the time was enough to take it over that.
Point, the 10K that you needed. And I
think so that worked, and that was with the small amount of social media presence that we had. Because the issue with our social media stuff is our proposition, our stuff is changing. We went from the products that we had, and we're trying to get rid of, to this almost totally new category of things, which are almost like anti-categories, depending on how you look at it. So we just popped this video out, and then it just hit. And then as well, someone commented on the video, "Oh, I've been looking for one of those."
Yeah.
Anyway, I look at the sales the next day. I could see her name.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah. So you could actually
Yeah.
attribute that post and that
Yeah,
comment
it was
to
great.
to the sale. And I think even the social media presence. I think having, again, Instagram, for example, creating an account with your brand, posting pictures of the products, whether it's them in use, whatever it is, creating, trying to get engagement essentially with lots of people through lots of different ways on that platform. Over time, you'll build up followers with hashtags. You're hashtagging the hashtags that are relevant for that product. People are searching, they're finding your page, and then this is a potential new market for you. Ultimately, yourself. I mean, if you launch in the future other products, they're going to be advertised, and even though it's not directly like buy this product, you're going to be putting pictures of that new product up, and existing people who have already been following what you've been doing will then potentially have bought into your brand, like the account, like what you're doing, and then they buy the next one. And these little things all build up over time. And again, you can drive ads from Instagram accounts and things like that. But no, I think it was an interesting one, because we spoke a bit about that, didn't we? And you were excited by it. And was it, you said your sister's sort of having a bit of, or was it your partner, bit of involvement with it?
Sister, I'm not on many social media platforms. I should be for some of the stuff that I do, but I'm just not. So I needed somebody. I looked on the Fiverr route, just to see what services were out there, but they were all short-lived sort of thing. I was short-lived, or quite a lot to keep maintaining. So we just went for this bit of an experiment with my sister, and it's working out super well, because she's going to be having a baby at some point, and our products are generally targeted at the younger age, probably no older than 8 anyway. But she's like fully into this new category of things, like she's researching it for her own benefits.
Yeah.
So it's going to work really well for those purposes. That we've got somebody who's more of in that space to put the presence on there and deal with the posts and XYZ, but also has a genuine interest in that set of categories. So we're seeing like a nice long-term benefit with that. So yeah, you'll see more in that space. I'll share the bits and pieces as we produce them.
Yeah.
I suspect we'll have a decent presence come the end of this year, 2021. Our presence in social media for the categories that we're targeting will be quite relevant.
Yeah. Okay. And on the topic, you say not on many social media platforms. I noticed you're not in the mastermind group either. So we need to get you in there. I couldn't find your name in there anyway.
I'm not in there. My partner's in there.
I see. Okay. All right.
Yeah. So I'm not in there. So the only social media that I maintain now is LinkedIn, and the only reason I initially got that was because I needed it for my corporate job. We were doing like a VIP dinner or some BS anyway. And then the marketing team was like, "Have you got LinkedIn?" I was like, "What's LinkedIn?" Looked at it, I was like, "It's just like Facebook. I left this years ago. What the hell?" Anyway, I started using it. But now I'm not on Facebook, although I should be, because the other stuff we work on, our service accommodation platform, we're using Facebook to get people onto the platform as well.
What platform?
Where is it?
Banner.
Yeah. If you're a service accommodation operator and you need a booking direct platform, yournighting.com. Shameless plug. But yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn and maintaining that, and I push some of that content out around Your Nighting. But then I should be on Facebook, because a lot of people, whether it's the guest booking or whatever else, are on there. But if I was on there, I think what would happen is I'd get myself too married to the other brand and want to do more on there. So me not being on Facebook, which is our primary presence for the Amazon brand, it's quite good really, because it's just there. I get updates weekly, or if I speak to my sister, I might see what's going on. But to be not married to the social media piece is quite good. Otherwise, that 10% time I was talking about turns into 20%, 30%. So I'm quite happy to offset that. Not in a bad way, just that someone who's better at doing it, and I just need a small piece of information.
And you can check in now and again to see how it's getting on, etc. And again, you're the one working behind the scenes on the products and things like that, and all the other aspects of the business that needs the attention. So, finally, then something to mention. I've got a new. You probably know, I spent a lot of time recording the new 3.0 version for 2021. And one of the things that we speak about in there is the 10K and the 100K member mindset. We've got heaps of people in both of those clubs, we call them, but people who've achieved really awesome results through FBA after the training. And as one of those people now, having gone through what you've gone through, what would your advice be? Because ultimately, my job, what I try to do, is get everyone into those categories, make their first product a success, give them as much help as I can, and try to understand how do those people get to that point. And we think we've got a pretty good understanding of it with the new training and what we're doing. But being one of those people, what would your advice be to people who are starting, who, a lot of people's goals are to get that? I get messages, that's what I want to do. I want to get into the 10K club with my first product. That's my goal. And I'm going to have little baby steps to get there. But that's ultimately where I want to be per month, or for example. So yeah, I'm very bad at summarizing questions. I feel like that question I was going to ask you is 5 words, and I've probably been speaking for a minute, but you know what I'm trying to ask. So what would you say?
No, I got it. Just on that point, actually, I said about, like, we was asking what got me to this next product or whatever else, and it's like frustration. One of the bits of frustration was, like, I seen all the videos and stuff he's popping out with other people hitting the 10K club, and I was thinking, where am I not?
Where am I doing?
So that helped me in the background, really. Now, but to summarise really now, I think the 2 key things I'd go back and tell myself a bit, other than trying to, like, be a bit more detailed with the analysis and things. But the things that I've stayed true is sort of persistence and patience. Like just carrying on, like just however long it's taking, it's not quite right. And we went through several products before we ended up with this one. And that's a bit diminishing when you're like, you've got your list of 10 products, thinking 7 of those will do well. You reanalyze, and actually it's only one of them. Oh, okay, back to the drawing board.
Yeah.
So I think the patience side of it, because something will come out as long as you're doing things properly. And by properly, just be hard on yourself, because I was not hard on myself at the beginning. I was very, away with the clouds, I think, in terms of the percentages and stuff. Although it did start off okay, but it went downhill. But now it's like realistic. So being really patient with what we're doing, and then being persistent. It just takes time.
Yeah.
And I think what probably adds into that is this one product, which I've been messaging China all morning, right? The box factory's not ready to produce the boxes. The product factory aren't ready to pack the boxes. It's all it. I'm going to miss the deadline for Chinese New Year now. That product should have launched October, November maybe, and it didn't, through the myriad of issues we've had. The product is incorrect, loads of things, but we've just been persistent in getting it ready.
Yeah.
Now it will launch at some point this year, but when it launches, all of that effort will hopefully be sort of recovered, so to speak, as with the first product, because a lot of time and effort went into it, but it was just persistent to get to that point.
Yeah.
And I think what helps now is, because we've had that success, like good success with that one product, that persistence and patience, you can see that return on investment now. It's so I'm more than happy to spend 10 hours in a week on that one. I'll probably spend, not even exaggerating, 30 hours effort over the last few months just on the one product, between the finish of the product, not the product itself, the finish of the product, including the colours, paints and things, testing and packaging. Packaging's probably taken 15 hours of pure effort just to finalise packaging. But yes, sorry, I rambled on there. But
you're doing a me there. No, that was a really that was a really good insight into it. Like you said, I think I remember, and again, I'm going to do the same thing again now, but I had packaging issue. I remember being back and forth to my supplier, sending them image after image after image after image, back four, sample, not being able to get not even just the packaging, you say not the product, just the finish, not even the packaging, but the finish of the packaging. They got to that level of detail that it took so long for it to look right on the exterior of the packaging. And some of those things, the nitty-gritty things that really can take a lot of time. And for me, a lot of it was the communication barrier. It was very hard for me. I was, and still am, have difficulty communicating certain things to my supplier. And I know other people, it depends who your supplier is, basically. But I struggle with that quite a bit and just can't seem to get the message across for more of the finer details, for example, like finishes. But no, like you said, I think don't rush. Be thorough, resilient, be tenacious. Don't give up. And I had an email today from someone, and they sent me a product idea. I get them all the time, right? This product idea was banned. It was a bad idea. It was a bundled item. The bundled item was too expensive. It wasn't relevant enough, and I just immediately felt that it's a bad idea. And I have to tell them that it's a bad idea, but at the same time, I don't want to put anyone down, because ultimately they'd still incorporated lots of good things into what they were trying to do. They tried to differentiate. They'd come up with the idea of bundling. It just wasn't the right one. And that person emailed me back whilst we were in this call, and that mindset, instead of them saying to me, I can't do this, I'm going to fail, it's obviously I haven't got any clue what I'm doing. He was like, no problem. He was like, thanks for your feedback, I appreciate it. Back to the drawing board. And it's probably going to make him more hungry to go and find something else. And like that mindset that you're talking about there, like with anything, you've just got to keep going with it. And nothing good comes easy is a really good term to remember there, really, I suppose.
I think on that exact subject there, I probably could have had a much better stab the first time round. And what I didn't do, albeit I went through all the course content, the skim through, then the go back through, I probably didn't engage enough with yourself. I think we could have got to the conclusion that the first product that was launched was not a product to launch, even with the distinguishing, splitting it up and the bundling and bits and pieces. But I didn't do enough of it. And I think that's where it changed dramatically for this last product. We had tons of engagement, we're going for a list, making sure it's okay. I mean, the bundling option for it, we've been getting reviews now, people going, oh, this is such a great addition, the bundle item. Yeah. So, like, that level of detail of really filtering out the chaff, I didn't do the first time round. I know it was available. I could have emailed you every day, and I just didn't. So that's one thing I'd recommend anybody who's going to be starting, is not to like totally exploit your time, but just get it out, get that ratification. And I thought in my head to begin with, I've gone through the core stuff. I know this. Yeah. Don't worry, I'll go for it.
Yeah.
Whereas it could have just been, it might have been 5 emails. That first product, money all in, I'm guessing here, let's call it 5k, around that sort of figure. Those 5 emails I could have sent just to really ratify it might have saved me that 5k, and I didn't do it.
Yeah.
So that's probably important for all your new students, either soon to be or existing. Have that collaboration. That's what it's there for, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. That's the reason it's there, and there's no doubt in my mind that there's a direct correlation between people who have a lot of input and reach out to me and ask me questions with people who do well. I don't usually hear from someone that I have never spoken to and they just reach out to me and say, hey Dill, everything's going absolutely amazing, here's my product. Usually it's the people who are really involved. Not only does it keep them on their game, because they're staying in it, they're staying engaged, they're in the community, in the mastermind group, they're speaking to me, but also, I see, like I said to you before, I almost feel like I'm launching people's products with them, and I've got so much involvement with so many different Amazon businesses. I can spot. I know. I should. I can spot things that are easier for me to spot, just because I've got more exposure to it through all of the different. I've seen 100 problems. So when you ask me, Dill, what could be the problem with this? My brain is in overdrive about what's happened with other people's issues, and then I can come back with some sort of solution. So, yeah.
I have genuinely got one question for you then, whether or not you want to keep this in or whatever else, is one of the newer products we're going to launch, dead happy with the correspondence, really perfect communication, just worked out really well. They've done a lot for us. Just about to start the order, and they've asked for just a straight out bank transfer outside of Alibaba. Have you come across that? Any students?
Yeah, so that's a really good example of a question that I'd prefer to be asked rather than someone to just gamble with it. And bank transfers, and you'll hear this from the bank will tell you this. When you do a bank transfer, when you create a bank transfer to an account, once it's gone, it's gone. You can't get it back once you've unless you can prove lots of different things, which are very difficult to do. Typically, once you've made that transfer and it's in that person's account, you're stuffed, basically. Whereas if you pay through a credit card, if you pay through PayPal, if you have a trade assurance deal attached to the payment, then those things are much more safe. So I personally, if someone asked me that, if it was just a straight transfer with no trade assurance to a supplier, unless you've got a very, very strong relationship with them and you trust them, I wouldn't do it. And even with the trusted relationship, you've still got to accept an element of risk by doing it that way. And that would be my advice. If it was a new product, new supplier, I would absolute no every day of the week, because it's just not. I've never seen anything bad happen with it, but that's because I advised not to do it, because it's just wrong. People ask me that quite a bit. I'd say once a month I'll get a message saying that the supplier wants to keep it off of Alibaba, and ideally we don't want to do that. But yeah. No, it's a good example.
So I think longer term, I can see this particular supply being really good. I think I'd be more comfortable doing that in the future. So we'll see what happens over the next few weeks. They're going on holiday end of this week anyway.
Yeah,
so
they got Chinese New Year, haven't they? So
we'll pick it up there. And in terms of order priority, I think we're not going to start that order for a while. So we've got some time to sort of deal with some of those admin bits and pieces. But
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, mate, thank you very, very much for coming on. I appreciate it. I appreciate your time. First of all, coming on in the morning. I know it's 10 a.m. in the morning, get coffee, but it's it's ultimately your time. I appreciate it a lot. And I look forward to seeing now as time moves on. Like I say, hopefully, it might be a year's time. There's no rush for this at all. Obviously, we're going to be in contact over the duration, but we'll check in and hopefully we'll be able to do like a part 2 to this in 2022 when. Maybe we're allowed on a holiday again, or we're allowed out of our houses. Possibly, you never know. Who knows what will be happening in 2022? But no, thanks for coming on, and hopefully people found a lot of value in it. If anyone's got any questions, guys, for me or Matthew, just pop it in the comment section below. If we've missed anything, if you want us to expand maybe on something that you want to hear a bit more detail on, that would be great. But yeah, awesome, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks, mate. Top man.